Hello everyone, I'm L.A. Little and this is your daily NeoTA wrap, where we take a look at these markets every time. We do it from a neoclassical perspective. Each time we ask ourselves what happened today and what does that tell us about the coming ones. I do this show 4 times a week, every Monday through Thursday, broadcast at or before 10 o'clock Eastern Time. It's archived on YouTube, available to you there under the channel L.A. Little. Also do a show on Sunday night where we try to take a little bit broader of a view. You can get the daily stuff here during the week. Sunday night show steps back a little bit, looks at a little bit bigger picture. And speaking of the bigger picture, we are coming up on another one of those big choices. Looking at the ending numbers, we're up percent across the board pretty much. NDX still the laggard. This has been the case all the way up, has been the case pretty much all year. This thing has lagged fairly consistently all year long, and we'll see it here in the charts when we look at it. Gold up slightly, silver had, actually silver was up today. I'm not sure why that shows down. I think it was up. We'll see in the charts here in a second. Bonds got whacked pretty good today. Dollar was down as well. So it's almost as if you just look at these items here, right? This is kind of saying risk off if they go up, risk on if they go down. And they're going back down a little bit. They're consolidating, in my opinion, and the risk assets are getting a run again. When I speak of what's next, I'm speaking to the fact that on these markets, if we go back all the way back to December, you've had straight down moves, right? Pretty much a week at a time, straight up moves, straight down moves, straight up moves, straight down moves, straight up moves. I think you get the picture over and over and over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times we've ran from this area to this area in the last roughly 8 weeks. Once a week, basically. And here we are again, coming up to test the highs. The key area has been, continues to be right here. That's where we're at. We're right back up there. We're going to see if we can break through it. If we don't, then you can expect they will sell this thing down and come right back down here and test the backside again. If they get over it, you have to imagine stops are building in these areas, just as they are building in this area. And a move above that works its way higher is going to start to trigger those stops and eventually go test this top and probably break out. Conversely, if it comes back down again, a break of these lows is going to probably start triggering these stops, and then it's going to try to take out that and then go down. This is the area. It has been the area all year long. We came into 2015, made a low, made a high, made a low, made a high, made a low. Now, is this another high, or are we going to actually break out? Volume shrinking as we come to the highs to test them. It just fell short today, and actually for the bulls, that's what you wanted. 20.64.62 is that high. Got to 20.63.55, came within a buck. You got to think, you got the employment number tomorrow. You got to think they're going to test it. And, if that employment number somehow allows them to spike higher, that's a dangerous situation, because a spike over that fails will probably lead to a faster move to the downside. So, if it does spike, you got to watch it. You got to make a decision as to whether it's really going to make a run or not. Because typically what happens, from a trader perspective, if we start out up here somewhere, what am I going to do? I'm probably going to buy it. I'm going to put my stops up underneath. That's just the way it works. And if these stops are thrown in there real quick by enough size, in enough size, and it breaks back to the backside, then everybody's going to start chunking stuff again, just like they've done here and over here. So that's the risk on the breakout always. It will definitely be the risk tomorrow, and we'll see if they can break it or not. The question is there anything tells us that they will? Well, the S&Ps are right there trying to do it. If we look at the broad composite, it's coming up to do its test as well. 47.74 got to 47.67, so you're within 7 points. I would think this will test tomorrow too. Now this one's a little bit different. The setup's not quite as clean. In other words, if I'm looking at the ranges here, I really have to use the tops and the bottoms. There's really kind of nothing in between, somewhere in that area there. And so really, this one, it's got to break over the tops. There is a test here on a swing point high, and I suspect that one's going to try to test it as well. NDX, and we were talking about this being the laggard, and you can see it here in the chart. All the other charts, all the other indexes, they actually made new highs in December. This one did not, right? So a lower high here, another one, and then a little higher one, but still lower than these, right? Now you're coming up to try to test again. The range on this one is really about the same. Let me draw it in correctly. It's right in this area down to these. So again, just like the NASDAQ, it needs to break above them all. But of course, a key test here that closes over it would probably say you're going to get a further push. So the S&P, the Dow Jones are the ones leading it up. These are lagging. And then we go to the Russell. Now the Russell today actually broke out. So if you're talking about the ranges like we have been, the Russell's range was basically here, the smaller range. The larger range is that same area. One could argue it's down to here, but really this is the range in my opinion. It did get over it today. They had no volume. It was moribund today. There was nothing going on. But it is over it. Now it's done this previously and failed. This time it's trying to make a run for here, whereas the rest are just trying to make a run for their their smaller range highs. But the Russell is suggesting that the market wants to try to move higher. Tomorrow's going to be the day. If we go look at the sectors real quick, I was glancing through these. There's really not much here. I mean, yeah, they're going up, but I mean, look at the volume pushes on the way down. Look at how it comes back up. If I go to the transports, same sort of thing. You're coming up, you don't have much volume. And again, just like we were talking about before, I mean, you really do have lower highs all across the board. And, kind of sideways down here at the bottom. But, if you're a classical TA person, you're probably drawing these kind of, these kinds of things. In classical TA, when you get this kind of a wedge, it's usually supposed to break to the downside. I don't follow that all that much. I'm more interested in the volume. The volume's hit down here with volume. Does suggest that it's probably going to try again here at some point. So I guess I can't get too enamored about that one. I look at the SOX. It looks about the same, a little bit worse off, in terms of the way it's traded. If I look at the XLB, now last night they actually went over back under, had a little less volume. We talked about it wasn't extended, it was just an over-under. But they had broken multiple swing points, and today they actually carried through. Remember, this has been, along with the energy, has been one of the weakest, or the two weakest groups out there. If you pull over, it's been a very sloppy chart. If you pull over the weekly, you can see it's coming back up. A very sloppy pattern, but it was a nice breakout. And again, if you're a classical person, you're drawing these kind of wedges here, right, like that. That's what I used to do. You get into the apex of the triangle and you get the breakout. That says it should travel as far as this to the breakout area, which would mean up here somewhere. again, I don't follow that. I'm more interested in what the volumes do. So we'll see how it trades when it gets to the highs. But that one's a breakout. A weak sector gets a break to the top side. XLE could not, even though oil got a pretty nice push again today. XLF, financials, they're coming back up to test. Now the financials, they've actually said that they're sideways because they got over the swing point high, the high of the low, the swing point low, which says sideways trend. Now they're coming back up to test again into that prior lows high. There's a swing point high here, has a huge amount of volume on it. That's really the test, this area. That's where you find out, is it really going to make its move or not. If it can crawl over this, very good for the market. If it can't, not so good. So that's still, the jury's still out on that one. That's a key sector. Another one is the XLI. That one's also coming back to test the swing point high. That one's definitely stronger in my opinion. And then we look at technology, and we already know the NDX is struggling. Look at technology, how it's coming up on absolutely nothing. Very sloppy chart as well. 2 swing point highs there and 2 up here. So, if technology does kick in, that would be a huge boost to this market. A break there could take you up to test these highs up here, right? That could kind of be what catalyst takes this thing higher. But right now, you have to look at that and say, wow, can it really? It's certainly not showing enthusiasm, if you want to put it that way. So XLK coming up to try to test as well. And the last one to look at is a strong one now, is the XLY. So consumer discretionary, again, no volumes that's coming up there, but there are no volumes at the highs. So it's coming to test the highs. So XLB, XLY, pretty strong. XLK, XLF, not so. And they have some key tests coming up, just like the indexes do. XLI is doing pretty well, and I actually didn't cover XLV. The IBB came up today on nothing. The XLV is just a very sloppy chart. So I don't see anything in the sectors telling me anything. I don't see anything in the indexes other than the Russell indicating that it probably wants to push higher. Last night, if you remember, it was mixed, where the listed issues, SPX, had told us, it might want to try to pull back some, but the NASDAQ, the NDX, looked like they wanted to try to push higher. We did get the push out of the gate this morning, and they just climbed all day long. Well, actually, they went sideways and then started climbing at the end of the day. If we look at the OX markets, over here, we've actually got, I was going to show you the yen and the euro again. You got the euro and the yen working higher, or basically building out bases. And if you look at the dollar's building out a base as well. Dollar's still trying to come back into the bottom of this bar. Not that far away, has a decent shot of doing it potentially tomorrow. If you look at the oil market got a bounce up today. But if you take a look at it on a weekly, that looks like it's going to try to fail there. Actually, it wasn't the weekly, it was the monthly I was looking at. Yeah, here's the monthly. So you got these two big bars that coming into it. You've certainly got volume, but the big resistance is up above. But this little overlap right here is the test. It came into it, failed. That looks to me like it's probably going to fail for now. You've had a huge downdraft in this market. So, yes, it can bounce huge, but at the same time, you can't expect it to do it. Now, if it does get a run going here, and let me just put it up here, this is an ABCD structure. In other words, if it gets over that, right, then it can extend, and you can actually get over this swing point lows high and change the trend to sideways on the short-term time frame. That's definitely possible, but it's got to get over it. It's got to run up there and get over it. That high, in my opinion, was a spike high off a short covering. I think it's going to be very difficult to get back up there immediately. I think the more likely case is that you're going to see this thing come back down here and test into this area again. And then at that point, maybe it can. flipping over to the other weakness, or the other area that we should look at, is the bonds. The bonds, the big bar is over here. That's the wide, not so much a wide price, but it had a decent wide price. But that's the high volume day for sure. 132.49 is the high. Looks like to me it is going to try to get back into it. More than likely that is going to be the buy. Right now it's congestion here and it's holding. But I wouldn't be surprised to see it get back into this area. All of those things, you know, the way they're setting up, the dollar and this, seem to support the S&P 500 trying to make a run higher. But I mean, it's, you know, it's a toss-up. This doesn't have to come back in. It came back in on nothing. So I mean, it may just hold right here and head back the other way. So I don't see the Ox markets telling us anything. If we look at the overseas markets, other than China and the Hong Kong markets, they're all hanging at highs. Well, certainly Brazil isn't. Brazil's a whole different story. But the rest of those are basically hanging at the highs. Europe is right at the highs after, you know, nice big 7-8% run to start the year in January off the ECB QE stuff. And they're just hanging up there. They're not giving a penny up. And, you know, most of Asia's hanging near their highs or at highs. So if you think about, you know, the market, and you think about, you know, what does it, you know, where does it want to go? You know, if we bring back the S&P, and if we look at this from a trend perspective, right, on this particular time frame, right, the trend is definitely sideways. I mean, there is no trend up or down. It's really sideways, right? This thing's just been going sideways in what? This big range. If you pull this back and you look at it on a weekly, right, the trend here is fairly obvious. It's still up. I mean, that's where the trend is. If you put a regression to the mean, you know, right, the mean's somewhere in there. If you pull this even farther back and look at it on the monthly, there's obviously, you know, a trend to the upside. I mean, I don't know how else you can read that. So from all those longer term perspectives, where it's the monthly or the weekly, the trend is up. And so if one wants to assume the trend continues, which is not a bad assumption, then you have to assume, you know, that this more than likely is going to break to the top side. Now last week it looked like it was going to break to the downside, right? A week before that looked like the top side. You can argue it, of course, when you get up there, you can argue it looks like it will. I don't know if it will, though. I honestly do not know if it will. I have one clue and some weak clues suggesting that it may do it this time. But there's nothing. What you really have to do is you have to see if it can do it. If it does it, you put your exposure on, you put your stops underneath, and you shoot for these highs and higher. If it fails, that's the breaks, right? Because there's nothing here to tell you it is going to succeed. There's enough out here wrong for this thing to fail. At the same time, you got central banks goosing this market like they always do, and that part of it has been the winner for a very long time, so it's not something to ignore. All right, let's take a look at the some viewer questions. There was a couple of them tonight, and let's pop to those and see what we got. So let's see, the first one has to do with BTU, which is a let me find it here, which is an energy company. Now energy had been making a nice big spike up, of course, with the oil recovery. Let's quickly look at this. So I see a swing point low on December 12th. And let me see, this is on the daily chart. December 12th. Okay, that's this low, which would mean a bearish retest regen for the stock. Yes, that is true. So what we're talking about here is, this is the first, well, actually it's not. You had a break. Sorry about that. Let's draw that again. you had a break here of this low, right? And so this was a retest regen. So that was the first retest regen. When you get over a retest regen, and this has, that says no longer is the trend that was in place, right? Because this failed to regenerate lower. So now you have to view it as kind of sideways, right? So that's the first thing I would say about this chart. Now, having said that, now you have another one, and that one's this one. And it came right up to it today and got over it, it looks like, which I believe is what the gentleman wrote, 771, got to 772, closed at 68. So you go over it, back under it, right, close under it. So the question is, yeah, so the question, I'm sorry, I'm trying to read this. So it made it over it, back under it. Was that a failure, or does it need to close under the low? Well, no, it doesn't need to close under the low. You know, right now it's neither, right? It's testing. As a matter of fact, you can assume it's going to try again tomorrow, because the volume here today was 11.836. The volume over here on that bar, 11.9, so almost the same. Now, what's really turning this back now, that retest regen that happened down here that I've already talked about, this was the key one. Even though this is a regen, an attempt to regen, I'm always looking at the first one more so than the next one. And so when you get over the first one, that kind of changes the whole picture and says, okay, more sideways. So then I'm not as focused on the retest regen on the next one, right? Because it's already told us it wants to go sideways. That's what the retest regen is about. So you're really looking at the lowest one. What's happening here now, though, is really this bar, right? This is the one that's got the volume. And this one, this was the breakdown bar. And so when you look at this, what you see here, right, this line, it's really off this area that is showing you the resistance. And so as it's coming into that area, you know, that's the area that's giving it fits. That price point 762. So if I wanted to see this trade lower, I would want to see it at the end of the week probably close underneath there. Let's look at the weekly and see what the weekly looks like. Now over here it's a different story, right? Because you don't even have lows to retest regen on until you get way up here, because this thing has been so weak it hasn't been able to print a swing point low. So that's one thing. Let's look at the monthly. Now the monthly you do, and that low is 1434. That would be the first time there, and that's way up here. That's this bar. Well, actually it's not, it's in here somewhere, but that's a long way up. So I don't see anything here other than these two bars that's giving it fits. If it stays up here, you know, one more bar, I would expect it's going to try to get to the high. So that's kind of the way that one looks. Okay. All right. Let's see about the next one. So the next one is OMC. Please take a look at this from a longer term investment perspective. It reports earnings next Tuesday and it pays a decent dividend. I'm thinking the weekly, monthly chart looks good, and the weekly showing a successful retest regen. If you agree, how would you position an initial investment considering next week's earning? So this is somebody wanting to go into it. Okay, perfect. And I really appreciate you giving me time frames and what you're trying to do. It really helps me to help you. And I haven't mentioned this tonight, but you know, always, if you want to ask questions, it's easy. Pop into TA Today, go to NeoTA TV. There's some ways to contact me down here, and I'd be happy to take any of your questions. So let's first just take it from the long term, and then we'll work our way backwards. Okay, so long term, nice big strong thing. It's been consolidating now since about, really you could argue since here, so about October. That's about 16 months. So that's a long time. All right, so 16 months, you kind of have this consolidation area here. Swing point high, it got over it already, did a retest and a regen, and so far that's holding. And kind of to answer that question from the previous question, you know this has succeeded in regenerating when it breaks out, and I think that was the question you were asking me, and I probably didn't answer it completely, so I'm taking this opportunity to do it. When I see this trade back over that swing point high, that's when I know that more than likely it really has regenerated. Until then, it's still testing. And right now, this one, of course, is on a monthly and it's still testing. So this looks all fine. It's just consolidation for a long period of time. Let's look at the weekly now. Okay, so on the weekly, okay, so now here you have a different situation than what you thought. Here was your first retest regen. So really, you went over it, you broke over it here, right? Traded over it, and then you immediately came back to test it. That was here, held. You see how it tried to regenerate and then immediately failed again? That's why I always say you want to see a couple bars. Like there's one bar, but the next one didn't give it to us. And then it ended up coming right back the other way and got underneath that swing point low. So what does that tell you? No longer is the trend that was in effect. Instead, it's sideways. And so this one's in a sideways trend right now, which is consistent with the long-term trend. And let me see what else is out here. Okay, so the range on this, I like to look at things in ranges. The range on this looks like about here, right? Something like that, right? You see those four ranges? I like them when they're equidistant. That always makes sense. For whatever reason, they tend to do that. And you can kind of see the dividing lines here and there. And so it's been testing this one, trying to fall back into it, right, as a result of failing there. But holding pretty well. So if I'm trying to enter this, going back to the question now, let me look at the daily now that I've done all that. So what does the daily look like? Where is the daily? Let's see what it looks like. All right, so on the daily, well, on the daily, you definitely have two ranges. You have this one, and you have the one underneath it. You have somewhere in there, almost equidistant. Two swing point highs here, two up there. If it were to trade above this for a couple of bars into earnings, I probably would take a position, an entry position, recognizing that it could trade all the way back down here again. That's your risk, and so it's a harder trade to make that trade. But what I like about this stock, that when I look at it, is I like kind of the way I've seen the volumes back here and here. You know, when it was holding and then when it was pushing back up here, nice volumes. You did get one spike on the way down here, but you tested under it with lighter volume. And here again, you test it with lighter volume again. So it kind of looks to me like this thing wants to try to work higher. And the fact that you've got multiple swing points here and up there, that could get you some juice if it trades higher. And that these swing points at the top coincide with this one. So really, if this ever does get back up here and breaks these, you're going to get a nice big run. Because then that would do what? It would regenerate on the monthly, do multiple swing point breaks on the other two charts. So really the key area short term is here. My guess is, since it's Tuesday, my guess is unless this market really takes off, you know, the general market, it's going to trade in this area and be hanging right there right before earnings. and make it hard, right? That's typically the way it works. And so I would probably just wait and make it prove it if it doesn't do it beforehand. If you want to take a small position, you just got to realize your stops are got to be back down here. It's a lot of risk. So, okay, that's the best answer I could give you. And typically, I don't trade in front of earnings myself. I got to really, really like a stock. If I have a stock long term, I won't trade out of it. I might size it down a little bit, but I typically will not enter a stock prior to earnings. I've got to have a pretty good insight that it's going to make it versus just go after it. All right, my time is up. Tomorrow's going to be a big day, another big test. Can these markets finally break to the top side? I don't know that they can, but I'd be a fool to say that they can't. That's it for tonight. Have yourself a great one. I appreciate you being there. I'm LA. This is, and it was, your daily NeoTA wrap. I'll see you on Sunday. Good night.